Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Grimes, titled Artangels. So you ever encounter one of those artists that seems to operate so much on their own wavelength that it's difficult to get a clear inroad to how to perceive or even understand their art? As a critic, these are always some of the most frustrating acts to really discuss and dissect, and for the longest time, Canadian electronic pop artist Grimes seemed to fall directly into that lane for me. Now, I've been aware of her existence for a couple of years now. I first heard fragments of her music back in university when I was going through my dark wave phase, and I've made several attempts over the past 5 years to try to untangle her artistic persona in a lot of her albums. On the surface, it might be very easy to slot her early work into the spacious, airy side of dream pop, with the sparse beats and lots of dark, misty atmosphere. Somewhere between Enya with a splash of the more eclectic electronic percussion that some have compared to Bjork. But Grimes is a lot more lo-fi and ragged in her presentation. The sort of garage band produced material that seems so fresh online in the late 2000s before, well, everyone started doing it. And the half-heard nature of her vocals and lyrics made things even tougher to really decipher. I still find her debut album, Geedy Primes, perversely fascinating. Mostly because the deeper reference points to Dune feel simultaneously incomprehensible and yet perfect all the same. As a real fan of Doom, the sort of deeply eclectic passion project, you could tell she had zero expectations would ever catch on anywhere. And I'm still trying to make heads or tails out of Halfaxa, which felt less esoteric and alien than in her debut, but no less impenetrable. I could sketch out the reference points to the weirder edges of synth pop, electronica, and indie R&B, but Grimes seemed to exist in her own universe, and my grip on it felt tenuous at best. I mean, I liked it, but I had the feeling if I understood it more, I'd like it that much more. So okay, did things get better with Visions, the first album she released under indie label 4AD? Well, it might have cleared away some of the lo-fi blur to focus more on the distinctive, ghostly electronic scratch paired with more textured percussion, but it seemed like some of the sense of alien mystique was missing. The album didn't really click for me. I'm not going to deny that Grimes could handle electro-pop, but the atmosphere wasn't quite as potent. Now, don't get me wrong, the midsection of that album comes close to recapturing that feel, but it couldn't help but feel like a little bit of individuality and personality had been lost, especially considering that it didn't translate to more of her work actually being comprehensible. So when I heard that things had been cleaned up even more for her newest release after she had scrapped an album that was being apparently too dark and negative, I was curious to see where she'd take Artangels. So what do we find? Well, I can say this. For the first time, I think I can understand this album and its themes, where Grimes is looking to take Artangels as a reclaiming statement to reclaim and redefine herself in her artistic identity, wholeheartedly pulling from a grab bag of influences to create a garish fluorescent record, and man, I wished I liked it a lot more. Now, keep in mind this is easily Grimes' most accessible album to date. It's probably the one that I will return to the most, and as a whole, there's no one problem that really hurts it. For me, as much as I like and agree with the thematic progression and the defiant choice to embrace pop that many would have deemed as disposable, it's not quite sticking with me because of a slew of minor quibbles that just kind of rub me the wrong way. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're able to overlook those, you'll find a lot to really love about this album. I can easily see why it's gotten the critical acclaim it has, but I'm just not quite there at this point. It's good for me, but not quite great. So let's start with Grimes herself, and I'll give her this. She's one hell of an expressive vocal presence on this album, from the ghostly tones where she started to the brattier side that sounds like a K-pop star breaking form, to a more plastic baby voice coo where every crack is plainly visible. And that's before Grimes amps up the more raw, visceral side of her persona that feels drawn from a particularly psychotic hentai nightmare, which comes to the forefront most on Scream, which features the demented Taiwanese rapping of Aristophanes, and Grimes howling her lungs out, which for the record, I really liked. Now, I'll be the first to admit that while I like her more ethereal, Enya-esque vocals the most, the contrasting darker moments really did work for me, almost enough to make up for the fact that the hyper-girlish, cheerleader-esque vocals really didn't. It didn't help matters that Grimes never feels content to use one consistent vocal tone to song, and nearly every time she shifts it up, it feels a little bit jarring. It doesn't quite mesh together as well as you'd like. And you know, you could say that about a lot of the instrumentation too, which takes on the pop structures that were defined on previous records, clears away the rest of the fog, and then splashes them in a lot of Technicolor fluorescent paint. The most obvious point of reference is late 90s dance pop, the garish synths, the acoustic guitar fragments, the gummy grooves, and the beats that were often far better than they had any right to be. The hallmark acts like Britney Spears and Kylie Minogue and Robin, and especially Madonna and Aqua. And Grimes gets why so much of this music sticks even today, because for as thunderous as some of those beats can get, a lot of the melodies really are strong. I might not love California for some of its blocky synths, but they carry a really good melody, and paired with the sample of Pond to Replay by Rihanna, the song gains a ton of momentum. It's really quite accessible, and that added color also factors into the instrumental choices. Grimes learned guitar and violin specifically for this album, and the moments where they come in to drive some of the groove or take more of the melody are some of the best points here, mostly because Grimes isn't afraid to let her guitar lines get nastier or freakier. Take Belly of the Beat, which operates on a metric-esque acoustic rollick with some hints of piano, but you can hear that electric sizzle lurking in the background to add that menace. Really great moment there. And really, the guitars are some of this record's best features. The ridiculously catchy progression on Flesh Without Blood, the roaring groove of Kill V Main, the warping rhythms of Pin that only seem to pile up and get more brutish towards the hollowed flutter of Butterfly, the album closer. And that's where we get moments like the strings on the opener laughing and not being normal, or that gorgeous interlude on Venus Fly, which might contain one of the most pummeling and thunderous beats on this album that I really did love that song. Of course, there are some choices in tone and production that I do question. The synth breakdown on Easily, the vaporwave-esque tones on World Princess Part 2, and the fact that all of these tracks feel really overstuffed and front-heavy. For as much as Grimes let the wispier elements drift and have some atmosphere or some of the guitar lurking in the background, the very noisy percussion and loads of squealing vocals and synth can make this album really quite an exhausting listen. It could have really used slightly longer moments to breathe, like on Life in the Vivid Dream, which really should have been a whole song beyond the fragment that it is. I wanted to see more of it. I wanted to see it expanded. But hey, I can see the callbacks that Grimes is trying to make here, and this takes us to lyrics and themes, most of which can be interpreted as a giant middle finger to those who seek to define, restrict, or help her under nefarious motives to co-opt her art. Hell, when your second song, California, is a self-described hate song against Pitchfork trying to commodify your pain, you're not exactly being subtle here. And she includes the audience in that picture and calls them out too, which would normally be pretty risky if she wasn't acutely aware of the feedback relationship that she has with the listener and how her own actions have been perceived. A lot of the songs highlight that process. One of the reasons that I really love Scream is how it describes in great poetic detail the excruciating process of wrenching pain out of one's body for the sake of the art. And I love how she stakes her own personal claim in the sound, not to be claimed or appropriated by hanger-ons or men who would condescend to her. And I really like the subversion of taking tropes and sounds of the hyper-optimistic late 90s dance pop scene, and especially considering how catchy and strong a lot of those melodies are, and showing the underlying seething darkness in the lyrics. Willful escapism at best, but nightmarish voyeurism at worst. But here's the thing. For as much as I will praise the feminist themes and rhetoric of a lot of this album, by co-opting the shallowness of late 90s dance pop, some of it unfortunately seeps into the writing, and I find myself searching for nuance that isn't always reflected to the level of detail that I was hoping. Take Kill V Main, which Grimes has described as being written from the perspective of Michael Corleone, Al Pacino's character from The Godfather Part 2, except that he's a vampire who can change gender and travel through time. So okay, ignoring that bit of weirdness, it doesn't really factor into the song. I appreciate how the song tried to dig into gangsta hypermasculinity and how Corleone broke the system when he started the war. I can see why Grimes is attracted to this topic and the overwhelming contrast. But you know, considering that was the movie that pushed Michael the hardest in terms of his family relationships and how it tied into masculinity and how he was considered a man, the song really feels a little undercooked and thin. More concerned with some of the iconography, well, not even the iconography from the Godfather movie, but not the deeper meaning. And sure, you get that in pop. Even in the last two songs focused on environmentalist themes and how Grimes has finally found some transcendence in her own world, it's sanctuary, but it's found through isolation from reality. I mean, I see the appeal, especially when reclaiming one's own artistic identity, but it feels cheapened, as like with Tyler the Creator's Cherry Bomb, the ending themes in that. You're taking your ball and you're going home instead of engaging any deeper. Hell, the most thought-provoking lyric on this album doesn't even come from Grimes, but from Janelle Monae on the excellent Venus Fly. Why you always call it black? The question of that qualifier, whether it's valid or good or even wanted on Janelle Monae's art, that's a huge one. The sort of question you could build an entire album around. And on a song focused on being too scary to be objectified, that sort of powerful artistic statement and quandary really stands out. I just wish the album hit more of those raw, potent moments. It could have resonated so much more with me. So yeah, in short, I really did like Artangels by Grimes. It's bold, it's colorful, it's the kind of mess, but it's in the best way possible. And on occasion, it hits some fantastic notes. The problem is that it's also garish, cluttered, a little overcooked musically, and a little undercooked lyrically. But hey, you expect that with pop music. And it does mean I'm giving this record an extremely strong 7 out of 10. Again, if some of my aesthetic quibbles don't bother you as much, you'll probably love this album, and I completely get why. If you're a Grimes fan alienated by the pivot towards more accessible sensibilities, well, you know, I still recommend you give this a chance. I didn't have an inroad to Grimes' art before, and the fact that she created one through Dance Pop really is something special. So, you know what? Coming from that universe, definitely check this out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, or any other albums coming out that you want me to take a look at, I'd be more than happy to give them a listen. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.